Hey guys, in one of my previous videos I talked about the blood tie team, and there people asked me to please talk a little bit more about Sentinel. Specifically, I mentioned that pulling for portraits for Nautica is more beneficial than pulling for Sentinel. So skipping Sentinel and putting the resources that you would keep by not pulling for Sentinel and use those resources into Nautica pulls to obtain portraits for her. That is a very deep and interesting topic to talk about. Portraits in general, such as characters and other stuff, are often misjudged, and yeah, we will talk about everything concerning this topic of portraits in this video, so let's dive into it. Now, the very first thing that you have to keep in mind, first of all, this video is not necessarily this is not for beginners at all, but they can still take something away here, because it is beneficial to know stuff now that will be in the future for you new players. So the first thing that we have to understand is that Reverse1999 is, even for the global players now, almost 2 years old. That changes the game, because if you now start a game, then you cannot just pull for everything, as it would normally be the case. If you start a gacha game out, then especially early on, you're gonna pull a lot for pretty much everything that is around, because you have to establish yourself a roster to play the game with and to progress as fast as possible. That is how you normally go about it. But for Reverse, as I said, that is completely different, because this game is 2 years old. And you cannot just pull for everything that is around. It would be a huge mistake, as we covered in my beginner guide and so on and so forth. You have to know exactly what you are doing. Otherwise, you will waste your resources. And people tend to never learn this, or if they do not regularly get hands on a new character, they will get bored, which means they don't enjoy this game, and I'm asking myself, why do I even play this? But that's besides the point. The point is that you have to manage your resources. The resources that you need to pull for characters, those are very scarce. And if you don't do that, then yeah, Reverse1999 is a very free-to-play friendly game. That is of course a good thing, but it leads to a misunderstanding for a lot of players, as if most of the characters in this game work perfectly fine at P0. That means you pretty much never need multiple copies of a character. This is a good thing in general, but to a lot of the player base it is also detrimental, because they will go by this mindset of, every character is perfectly fine at P0. I will never have to go for portraits, and it would be way better for me to, instead of going for portraits, pull for other characters to increase the size of my roster. And that is of course very wrong. Yeah, again, Reverse1999, the characters here in this game are mostly fine on P0, but that doesn't mean that portraits don't exist, and that doesn't mean that there is not a whole lot of value lying in these portraits. There are even characters that benefit so incredibly much from portraits that I would even recommend not playing them if you don't have the correct amount of portraits for that character. Good examples would be Liang Yue, Jiang Ningzhi, or Flutter page, for example, you can make arguments for LF, right? And there are a couple of more characters. I will not count them down all here. But let me give you one more example here with the character Ezio. That is a perfect fit for the topic because he fits both scenarios. He is a extremely heavy misjudged character, and he has to be played at least P1. Without P1, he's even more unplayable than he would already be at P0, and the actual recommended portrait for him is P4. That is the core reason why this character is on a discount, and you're discounted to obtain portraits for him. Not because the developers are generous, no, that is because you have to. The discount is a bait. You pull for shit, and it is only discounted because you have to play him at P4. That is the recommended value. You have to at least obtain P1. Otherwise, this character is almost unplayable garbage, but yet people think, oh, he is so good, he's there for new players because of the discount, blah, blah. No, absolutely not. He's good for new players because you can re-roll for him, and it's just simply the best option that you have available for yourself. That's why he's good for new players, not because he is discounted. Again, this discount is a bait because they are wanting to get resources away from players, and the players are actually so unaware and misjudging characters that they fall for this discount, while this discount is only here to serve as a bait, as it is not a real discount. You need portraits for him. That's why he's discounted, but the people eating this bait left, right and center. So yeah, there we go. You know, GU needs P2, Flutter page P1 is so incredibly valuable that not investing into this P1 for Flutter page when she dropped was a mistake. Not going for P2 for GU when she had her rerun, right? Big mistake. The point is that, yeah, collecting characters is an important thing because you need to have 2 teams at some point. Then you will have 3 teams, you will need 4 teams, right? And therefore you need a lot of characters, sure, but you still cannot pull for just everything that is around and throw your scarce resources into the trash can. You have to know what to exactly pull for. And if you are aware of this and you know exactly how to spend your resources, only then will you have enough resources by the time that a very good character drops that needs portraits, such as GU, for example. But people will never realize that. They will always go for more and more and more and more characters. They will have a bloated roster where tons and tons of characters are just there to collect dust or be used in very, very, very tiny little niche scenarios, right? That is resource management like rock bottom, if I'm being honest. So that leads us into the topic of Nautica Portraits versus the character as a whole, Sentinel. And of course, before we dive into that, I want to put emphasis on the fact that, yes, like again, right? Yes, pulling for characters to establish quite a big roster is of course important. It's needed. Yeah, you will have to establish multiple teams. Okay, but again, that doesn't mean that portraits don't have any value. That doesn't mean that you should never ever pull for portraits. In fact, at some point, be it like 6 months, 7 months, 8 months into this game, you will have to pull for portraits. At some point, you have to pull for portraits. Otherwise, everything that you have, all the characters that you have, will be at their minimal power. You will never establish something of greatness, so to speak. You will never have this god character that carries you through every content, right? And yeah, this is another very, very difficult topic to tackle, because there is also this absolute loser mentality going around of, or I'm fine with all my characters being at minimal strengths and kind of dog shit because I can get away with it, you know? That is an absolute loser mentality. Winners, if you want to have a winner mentality, that is establishing something that is actually good and that has true power, you know what I mean? And to establish something like that, something with power, you have to have a characters that has at least some portraits, like Liang, like Flutterpage, like Aleph, like Geo, you know? And what better point, I'm asking you, would be a better point to pull for portraits than an anniversary that hits us with a gigantic power creep? The answer to that question is, there is no better point than an anniversary that hits us with a new main DPS that is gonna be the best character in the entire game. That is the number one best point to ever pull for portraits. Of course, I mentioned other examples where this is also true. P1 Flutterpage, P2 Geo, you know, we count them. Sometimes you gotta go for portraits other than for an anniversary, other than when a huge power creep hits, right? But again, if you ever go for portraits, you need to, right? You cannot never pull for portraits. That's impossible. That's bad. Even if you would get away with it, loser mentality, right? Tackle this topic. And so that is a very, very big reason why you should pull for Nautica portraits instead of Sentinel. Because Nautica, that is the anniversary character, that is gonna be a huge power creep, that is gonna be the main DPS of the by far best team in the entire game, and it's gonna be a limited character as well. That is the best point ever to pull for portraits, so it is highly advised you actually do that. But it, of course, talking about the case between portraits for Nautica and the character Sentinel, it goes a little bit deeper than that. So let me talk about first what roles these characters fill and what their job actually is in their team to start figuring things out on a deeper scale. Okay, here we are really quick. Nautica is gonna be the main DPS. That is gonna be the most important character of the entire team. The main DPS is always the most important character of a team. That is the character that the whole team is built around, and everything else is here to benefit this main DPS as much as possible. Now, the sub DPS in a team is always the character that benefits the main DPS of yours in a much better way than any character in the game would. That's why Semmelweis here is the sub DPS for Nautica. Then is the character that we're gonna talk about here, Sentinel, coming in. Sentinel doesn't benefit Nautica better than Semmelweis would. And she wouldn't deal more damage, that's why she's not the main DPS, right? You get the point. So Sentinel is the support that already diminishes her value and puts her in terms of value below Nautica. There we go, right? This is the second argument why you should go for Nautica portraits and not for Sentinel, because first, Nautica is a limited character, she's gonna be the best character in the game, and she's an anniversary character that hits us with a massive power spike. Good. Limited, best character in the game. And her role is the main DPS, while Sentinel has a less important role, so to speak, a role with less value for the overall team. Good. And then here, of course, we have Medicine Pocket to round the team up and provide the sustain. Now, let's see how, first of all, how Sentinel supports this team, what is her exact job, and how does she get this done. In order to figure that one out and make it more understandable, let's actually take a look at her kit and what is the core part here. Why is Sentinel part of this team? That is because she does everything that Eternity does, but better. Damage output is also a part of this. Sentinel does a whole bunch of more damage than Eternity. It's hardly even comparable. That is also a part. But that is a part that doesn't really matter. Why? Because she's the support. A support, while of course it is beneficial if a support does a pretty significant amount of damage. Okay, cool. That is true. But the main reason why she is here, the key why we put her into this team, is not because of her damage output. That is because she fills the blood tide. That makes her and Eternity unique. Those are the two characters that fill the blood tide better than anyone else in this game would. And a support character always is the support because they benefit the archetype of the team the best. What archetype are we talking about when we talk about Sentinel? That is the blood tide archetype. What does this archetype need from his support? That is to, you guessed it, fill the blood tide. Again, only Eternity and Sentinel do this. Sentinel does this better than Eternity. Yeah, of course, she's also more AP friendly and she deals more damage, as we already figured out. So how does Sentinel fill the blood tide, and why is it better than what Eternity does? That is because she gains access to something that is called Fresh Wound. Whenever a bullet is triggered, with Sentinel provides a bullet to Nautica. When Nautica attacks, this bullet is triggered. When this bullet is triggered, that will make it so that Sentinel gains the Fresh Wound status. This Fresh Wound leads to her losing a portion of her max HP. That fills the blood tide normally, but for Sentinel the special thing is that the amount of blood tide that is filled by using this Fresh Wound status is specifically increased, and that is the most important part of Sentinel's kit, because not only does she fill the blood tide by the normal means that Eternity does, no, she has a mechanic that is specifically catered towards increasing the blood tide more than it would be increased by the normal means. And that is why Sentinel is better than Eternity. Of course, there's more, like a more AP friendly, more damage, right? She outclasses Eternity in every single way. But this is the true essence, the true kicker, why Sentinel is so much better than Eternity would be. And this is what the support slot has to do in the blood tide team. Okay, so now why am I telling you all this? What the fuck does this have to do with Nautica Portraits, man? You know, that's like the question that you might ask yourself, and rightfully so. I just told you all of this because I want to make it crystal clear that Sentinel is not here for anything else but to fill the blood tide. Everything else that she does is just a bonus, and Eternity gets this job done good enough, right? So you don't need necessarily to pull for Sentinel. It would be a little bit overkill, honestly. And that's why it's better to put the resources into Nautica Portraits. Let's take a look and explain things further while looking at Nautica's portraits. Here they are. So just her P1. Let's go over it real quick. You can now stack up more blood tide than you would be able to stack up without this portrait. Every time, just in case you don't know, every time Nautica performs any action whatsoever, she increases her max HP. Now, with her P1, this amount of a max HP that she increases every single time she uses an action is more, 1% more. The activation of her follow-up attack now needs less blood tide to be consumed in order to actually activate. Now you can already probably tell that this is a whole lot. 3 different things here are increased, and 2 of these things even synergize with each other. You can now increase your blood tide by more than you usually would, and less blood tide is consumed on a regular basis. This follow-up attack happens often, and every time it happens now, it will consume less blood tide, while you are also able to stack up more blood tide than ever before. And you can see that even the third thing that this portrait does also has some synergy with the other 2 things here, as every time you perform any action that includes the follow-up attack Mouth of the Mother, you increase your maximum HP, and that is now 3%. You know how much that is for every single action that she does? Every single time she increases her maximum HP by 3% now. You can see this P1 is gigantic value. It does so many things that it increases so many things that Nautica like constantly does and benefits from. Insane P1. Already like absolutely highly recommended. I would even call this one a must-have. And we can take this further even. Let's look at her P2. These 2 are the most amount of value, and I would recommend everyone that pulls for Nautica to P2 her. More into that in a second. Now let's read her P2 first. Divine Yoink, as I like to call it. It's her ultimate, and in order to unlock her ultimate in the first place, she doesn't have Moxie, she has Faith. And whenever the blood tide is filled by a certain amount, you get Faith. Once the blood tide is filled enough, you unlock your ultimate. And then you will convert the blood tide into stacks of blood sacrifice. So the more blood tide you have filled, the more blood tide you have available to yourself to turn into stacks of blood sacrifice. And again, the more stacks of blood sacrifice you have, the more damage your ultimate will deal. Now, the stacks are reduced to 7, right? So you need less amount of blood tide to create a stack of blood sacrifice. That will lead to you, obviously, having more stacks of blood sacrifice, and therefore your ultimate will do more damage. And not only that, but the stacks that you can possibly have are also increased. You would only be able to have like 25 stacks of blood sacrifice. With her P2 you will now have to have 27 stacks. Again, extreme value, right? Then each strike from your ultimate now doesn't use up like 25.5% but 27.5% of your max HP. Again, in case you didn't know, everything including her ultimate that Nautica does is based upon how much max HP she has available. So you can see she is a scaling truck. She will scale more and more and more. Everything that she does gives her max HP. The more max HP she has, she will deal more damage. And increasing now the percentage of the max HP that is used to calculate the damage is like the most important thing ever, and it is gigantic value. Right? Just so you are aware of this. And this portrait does exactly that. And there's more. Each blood sacrifice stack now restores, instead of like 6 to 8%, it restores 10% of her maximum HP. And yeah, again, right, like the percentages here are just much more beneficial. And for a character that scales up upon her percentage of max HP and the damage is calculated through this max HP is like a massive improvement. The more and more HP percentages are used to calculate the damage, the better, because she throughout the entire battle keeps increasing her max HP with everything that she does. She's like no other character in this game, to put it as simply and as short as possible, is even close to Nautica in any way. Not in terms of bulk, not in terms of damage output, nothing comes close here. Also, if we keep going, now her portrait 3, that is a little bit lackluster, I would say, compared to the first two portraits, and that's why I would say stop at P2. But let's read it. Here, healing received increased, right? It becomes 20% from like, what, 10-15%? For every 10% HP lost. So it's a crazy healing increase. And yeah, the heal that she receives by default from like her healers is also increased. And the HP loss effect is increased, which will then fill the blood type more and stuff. But yeah, all things considered, this P3 is of course very good, because you can see just a look at it and see all the numbers here that have percentages behind them. And this character, as I explained already, is all about these percentages. And these percentages, they become more and more valuable as the game continues, because she stacks and stacks and stacks everything. And this increases, as I just said, the value of the percentages. This is why this is so absolutely ridiculously insane. And yeah, we could go further and further. Like her portrait 5, for example, would then increase the damage with her ultimate, like specifically, and it would get even more absurd. You know, of course, P5 is always the best, that is needless to say. But if you really want to get like the best bet out of your buck, so to speak, out of your resource, then P2 Nautica. That is much more value than Sentinel could ever be. I mentioned all the reasons, right? Let me tell you them one more time. Okay, why are Nautica's portraits a much better investment, in fact, than pulling for Sentinel would be? That is because you don't need Sentinel. You can do this with Eternity. Nautica is a limited character. Nautica is a new character from an anniversary. That means that she is the best character by far in the entire game. We figured out that at some point you have to go for portraits. Otherwise, your roster will always be at the weakest that it can possibly be. And you don't want that. So what better point to go for Portraits than an anniversary that has a limited character, that will be the best character in the entire game for months and months and months to come. Right? And as well, Nautica is not just a character like that, but she fills a much more important role in her team than Sentinel would. Sentinel is a support and only here to fill the blood tide. Everything else that she does would just be a bonus. But Nautica is the tank, the DPS, she's everything this team has. She's again the best character in the entire game, and she's a main DPS, and she won't lose value. Let me tell you something. The best decision that I have ever made in this game was to P5 Lucy at the first anniversary. Why? Because she stood, thanks to me having her at P5, stood viable, very viable, like over the entire year that I have her right now. She was one of the best characters in the entire game, right? Especially because I have her at P5. That just underlines this fact. And now look what happens 1 year later. I have the second best main DPS in the entire game at P5, receiving a gorgeous garment and being part of the second best team in the entire game, thanks to her receiving her Euphoria. And I save shit ton of potential resources because I don't even need to pull for Lucy anymore. And that is, by the way, not a coincidence. That is not me lucking out. No, this is me having years and years of experience from tons and tons of gacha games that I have played in the past, and therefore I'm able to make precise decisions, and realizing that Lucy, thanks to her being an anniversary character, being something special. That was not a coincidence that she received her Euphoria update at the second anniversary and becoming one of the best characters in the game one more time. Right? It is not a coincidence that she stood so viable for so long. It was just a good decision because of my knowledge. Not every character will ever stay that viable, will not receive a Euphoria, will not receive a good Euphoria. Look at Tooth Fairy, how far she's left behind. Why? Because she's nothing special. Look at A-Knight, look at Kala Bauna, look at A-Knight, right? These characters are nothing special, they're just random drops. Look at Spathodea, right? Where's her Euphoria update? She's old, right? Those are just random characters. And not something special like Lucy. This is why you either not pull for these characters in the first place, or you would never go for portraits for these characters. But for anniversary characters that are something special and receive special treatment, that is a worthwhile investment, and you just have to understand that. And if you don't, then I will feel sorry for you in the long run, or maybe even not, because you are too stubborn to listen. All I need is to pull for Nautica, and that's gonna be it for me. So the best recommendation that I could ever give you is to go for as many portraits for Nautica as you possibly can. Now, of course, that is a little bit of a hot topic. Like, you need P2. If you pull for Nautica and you don't go for P2, I don't know what to tell you, right? To each their own. I would highly recommend it. I would say it's a must do, right? And that's all I wanted to tell you, and that was kind of a deep talk about a very important topic that is often misunderstood, such as portraits. And I hope I answered the question why portraits for Nautica are more valuable than pulling for a character like Sentinel. Don't get me wrong when I say this though, because that does not mean at all that Sentinel is a bad character or something like that. Sentinel is insane. She's gonna be the best in slot support for the best team in the entire game, and she outclasses Eternity in a gigantic manner, right? Don't misunderstand me here. I'm not saying Sentinel is trash or something. Sentinel is insane. But the way in that she releases and the spot that she fills in the team and the fact that another character can fill the slot in the team just doesn't make her a worthwhile pull. And that's gonna be it for the video, guys. I hope that was fun and informative. If you like Reverse1999 content in general, please consider leaving a follow on my channel. I would really appreciate that. But until next time, take care of yourselves, have a great day, and we love this game.